Hi, and welcome to DrupalBrief. This is an AI-generated summary of another video, podcast, or blog post. If you want to learn more about what's being discussed here, then please go check out the source. This podcast is produced by the team at Drupal Forge. Drupal Forge is the new #1 open-source development and hosting platform. It has all the functionality of the expensive platforms, but at very affordable prices. If you're looking for a new hosting provider, contact us for a demo before you get locked in. Okay, that's it. Make sure to click subscribe, and here we go.
Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hey there.
This is where we take the sources you send us, articles, research, maybe transcripts from YouTube channels you like, and we really unpack them.
Yeah, we distill the key info, those surprising bits, and give you just enough context so you can get up to speed, like really quickly, and understand what's actually going on.
Think of it as your personal accelerated learning path.
Exactly. We take the raw stuff and guide you through what's most essential, helping you understand the so what behind all the details.
And today, we're digging into sources you sent, specifically some excerpts from a recent deep dive on the Talking Drupal YouTube channel, episode 505, I think?
That's the one. Yeah, it's a great look at some, very practical challenges and some clever solutions popping up right now in the Drupal world.
Okay, so what are we looking at?
Well, the sources highlight two main things. First up, there's a module tackling a very current, pretty specific problem. That annoying bot traffic that hammers faceted search pages.
Yeah, okay.
And second, a module that's aiming to really simplify how you create and manage custom fields in Drupal. And it sounds like it has some potentially huge performance benefits too.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore what these modules actually do, why they matter for, developers, site builders, and maybe uncover some surprising things they offer. It's really about getting you informed on these practical Drupal issues and solutions fast.
Sounds good. Let's jump right in with the first one then.
Okay, so the source material starts with what they call the module of the week.
Right, that would be the facet bot blocker module.
Facet bot blocker.
Yeah.
Got it. And the core problem it's trying to solve is, well, it's something a lot of site owners are probably noticing, right? This big increase in bot traffic, specifically hitting faceted search pages.
Yeah, and what's interesting is why it happens. It's because bots and crawlers, and now these AI crawlers too, they see those faceted search pages. And every time you click a facet, like enable or disable one, it usually changes the URL query string.
Right. Adds a parameter or changes one.
Exactly. And crawlers see every unique URL as a totally separate page they need to crawl and index.
And if you've got multiple facets on a page, especially ones where you can select multiple values, oh boy. The number of possible combinations just explodes, doesn't it?
It really does. It's this geometric expansion of possible URLs they try to hit.
Which sounds like it could cause some real problems.
Definitely. And the big consequence is often cost, especially if you're hosted on a platform that charges based on usage. Bandwidth, number of requests.
Yeah, those BAT requests can suddenly make your build jump.
Precisely. So the module solution is pretty straightforward. It lets site admins set a limit. A maximum number of facet requests allowed from, one user agent within a certain time window.
Okay, so rate limiting specifically for facets.
Kind of, yeah. And you can configure the response, too. So you can tell it to send back a 403 forbidden error, or maybe show a custom HTML message to the bots it blocks.
The sources mentioned some tech recommendations, too, something about Memcache or Redis.
Yes. They recommend using Memcache or Redis with the right Drupal module, of course, for storing the facet bot blocker settings.
Why's that?
It just helps reduce database reads for the module's own configuration checks. It's a nice little optimization, kind of fits with the whole goal of reducing strain caused by the traffic itself.
And this module, it's pretty new, right? The source said March 2025, so just a couple of months old at the time of the recording.
Brand new, practically. But it supports Drupal 10 and 11, seems actively maintained, and they mentioned it was already on over 100 sites.
Wow. Okay. That quick adoption definitely suggests it's hitting a nerve, a real pain point.
For sure. The sources did also talk about alternatives, though.
Right, like Away.
Exactly. A proper web application, firewall, Cloudflare, Akamai, things like that. They sit in front of your site and filter traffic. That's generally seen as a better, more robust strategy if you have it.
But if you don't have a Wave, or it's not set up for this specific issue,
then Facet Bot Blocker is presented as a really useful mitigation tool, a good fallback or supplement.
They also mentioned that maybe just changing how facets are displayed could help, like using drop-downs instead of links.
Yeah, the idea being that if clicking a facet doesn't change the URL in a way crawlers see as a new page, they might just not bother trying all the combinations. Less incentive for them.
Interesting. It ties into that whole bigger discussion about AI crawlers too, doesn't it?
It does. They touched on the idea of an LLM.txt standard, kind of like robots.txt, but for AI. Though they noted AI crawlers might have less reason to follow it right now compared to search engine bots needing robots.txt for SEO reasons.
And wasn't there a stat from Cloudflare? Something about sites blocking AI traffic?
Yeah, an older report, but it found something like 85% of sites using a toggle were just blocking all AI traffic outright. But the counter-argument raised was, well, maybe you want some AI ingestion eventually as AI becomes like a new search, just not the crazy facet stuff.
So Facet Bot Blocker lets you be more surgical, block the bad traffic without maybe blocking all AI agents.
Potentially, yeah. It gives you that finer control over that specific problem area.
And the fact that this was a topic at Drupal Dev Days in mid-camp
Right.
really shows it's not just a niche issue. It's something lots of Drupal folks are dealing with right now. Performance, hosting costs. It's real.
It's definitely a practical tool for a timely headache. A good community solution.
Okay, so that covers the Facet Bot Blocker, a focused fix for a specific traffic problem.
Yeah.
Now, let's switch gears. The source material spent a lot more time on the second module, something that seems to touch on broader challenges. The custom field module.
Ah, yes. Custom field. This one sounds pretty foundational. The core idea, the sort of elevator pitch from the source, is really simple but powerful.
Okay.
It gives you a UI, a user interface, to create custom fields in Drupal without writing code. It has its own plugin system, kind of like Drupal core's Field API, but it handles the programming part for you.
Right. Now, custom fields aren't new in Drupal. We've done them programmatically forever. And CCK back in Drupal 6, that was huge, right? Bringing a UI to it.
Absolutely revolutionary at the time. Made fields so flexible for site builders. And the way Core's Field API works, it gives that flexibility by storing each individual field in its own database table.
Okay, but there's a but coming, I feel.
There is. And this gets to the core problem custom field aims to solve. Performance. That flexibility of separate tables is great, but if you have lots of fields, think of big enterprise sites, complex content types, maybe hundreds of fields.
Yeah.
That means hundreds of database tables. And doing basic things like saving content or loading it suddenly requires a ton of database queries and table joins.
Which slows things down.
Exactly. And especially if you use revisions, which adds even more rows across all those tables over time, it can really bloat the database and impact performance significantly.
Okay, so how does custom field fix that?
Its approach is pretty clever. Instead of a separate table for every little piece of data, it lets you group multiple related data points, calls them subfields, into one single custom field type.
So like street, city, state, zip could all be subfields of one address custom field.
Precisely. And that entire address field, with all its subfields, gets stored as just a single row with multiple columns in one database table.
Ah, okay. So way fewer tables, way fewer joins needed.
Drastically fewer. The source really emphasizes this offers a major performance boost, especially for sites with these complex field-heavy content models.
That performance gain alone sounds compelling. But the source mentioned other benefits too, right? Like simplifying configuration.
Absolutely. Think about core fields. Every single field needs its own storage config, its own field instance config. If you have, say, 10 fields that logically go together for a card component.
That's 10 storage configs, 10 field configs, lots of files.
Right. With custom field, you group those 10 pieces of data as subfields within one card custom field, and boom, one storage config file, one field config file. Much cleaner, less overhead.
Okay, that's neat. And reducing module dependencies, how does that work?
Well, it builds in some common functionality as subfield types. So maybe you need to reference a specific view on a page or add custom attributes to a link.
Yeah, normally you'd install maybe view field module or link attributes module.
Correct. But custom field has subfield plugins for things like that built in. So if its version meets your needs, you might not need those extra contrib modules anymore. Fewer modules to install and maintain.
That makes sense. And this idea of logical grouping for structured data.
Yeah.
That sounds really important, especially for decoupled sites.
Oh, it's huge for decoupled. With core fields, even if title, image, link, and summary always appear together in a teaser, they're just separate fields in the database. There's no inherent structure linking them.
Right.
Custom field lets you group them. Make a teaser custom field with those 4 as subfields, or product identifiers with SESCO, UPC, vendor number, or that address example.
So when you fetch that data via an API for your front end,
You get a nice, clean, structured object,
Right.
much easier to work with on the front end compared to juggling a bunch of potentially unrelated core fields.
this must impact the content authoring experience too.
Definitely. They mentioned that while modules like Field Group can visually group fields on the edit form,
Yeah, just visually.
custom fields grouping is structural. The data actually belongs together. Plus, it offers layout options for the admin form itself, like using Flex Display to put subfields into columns.
Oh, nice. So you could make the form more compact, more intuitive for authors.
Exactly. Instead of a long list of tiny fields, you get a nicely arranged group.
Now, what about paragraphs? That's the go-to for component building, right?
Yeah.
Is custom field trying to replace it?
That's a key point the source clarified. Generally, no, it's not a direct replacement. Paragraphs are still king for building flexible layouts with repeatable, reorderable components, things that are true entities themselves.
Okay, so when would you use custom field instead of or with paragraphs?
It's presented as a great complement. You might use custom field inside a paragraph type. For example, an FAQ paragraph. Instead of nesting paragraphs for question and answer, you make question and answer subfields within a single FAQ item custom field inside the paragraph.
Ah, simplifies the nesting.
Exactly. Or maybe you have a simple fixed section on a content type, like a call to action block at the bottom with a title, text, and link.
Yeah.
Instead of creating a whole paragraphs reference field just for that one fixed block, you could just use a CTA custom field with those subfields directly on the content type. Simpler setup if you don't need the full flexibility of paragraphs there.
And for site settings and decoupled.
Ideal. Structure your site settings using custom fields like header settings with logo, nav reference, etc., and your API endpoint just spits out perfectly structured data.
Okay, let's talk integration. How does it play with core stuff? Entity references.
Yep. It includes an entity reference subfield, and the cool part isn't just referencing, say, a user entity, it's adding context right there. You could reference a donor user and have subfields for donation amount and donation date within the same custom field item. The context travels with the reference.
That's powerful. Revisions.
Works seamlessly. Custom field data gets revised along with the main entity, just like core fields. No issues there.
Views. Big one for site builders.
Highlighted as very strong integration. You can add the whole custom field to a view or pull in individual subfields. Formatting, filtering at least for basic types like strings and number sorting, even relationships through those entity reference subfields. It generally just works.
What about multilingual? That can get tricky with complex fields.
This was mentioned as a really significant benefit, a major plus.
Why? Yeah.
Instead of the whole custom field being all translatable or all not translatable, custom field lets you check a box on individual subfields in the settings to make them translatable.
Whoa. Okay, so you could have an address field where street and city are translatable, but postal code isn't.
Exactly. The non-translatable subfields just inherit the value from the original language. That's way more flexible than the all or nothing you often get.
That is a big deal. Search API.
Integrates well. Search API indexes entity properties, and custom field defines properties for all its subfields, so Search API can pick them up and index them.
Okay, and decoupled again. You mentioned GraphQL Compose earlier.
Yes, the source called this a biggie. Huge for GraphQL users. The module apparently provides the necessary schema definitions for Drupal's GraphQL Compose module automatically.
Even for complex things, like if you have a view referenced inside a custom field.
Yep, even for that. And you get control. You can set schema names, control if a subfield is exposed via the API or not, right there in the UI. They really highlighted this as a strength of Drupal's GraphQL setup compared to other systems.
What about JSON API?
It works, but the source noted some limitations. These are apparently due to the JSON API spec itself around how it handles nested relationships and includes...
So not really the module's fault.
Seems not. The current way it works is that if you reference an entity inside a custom field, the JSON API output might just include the whole referenced entity object, which isn't always ideal, but it's a known limitation of the spec structure.
Gotcha. Feeds integration for importing data.
Yep, fully supported. You can map incoming data to your custom field subfields using feeds.
And there was something about display control, like the old fences module.
Yeah, sort of fences-like control, but at the subfield level. It doesn't depend on fences, but it lets you control the HTML wrappers, the outer wrapper, the label wrapper, the value wrapper, and add CSS classes to individual subfields when they're displayed.
Okay, so really fine-grained control over the markup.
Exactly. Super useful for theming, integrating with CSS frameworks like Tailwind or Bootstrap. You can almost make subfields behave like little mini components in how they're styled.
Okay, this next one sounds amazing, frankly. The source mentioned being able to add or remove column subfields to a custom field after it already has data. That's usually a nightmare with core fields.
Oh, absolutely. The source author seemed really proud of this, and you can see why. It's a massive pain point historically. Trying to add a new column to a core field table with millions of rows. Ugh.
Yeah, it usually involves complex update hooks, maybe temporary tables.
Right. But this module provides a service and drush commands like drush-custom-field.add-column that handle it for you.
Handles what?
It figures out how to update the database schema, copies existing data over if needed, updates all the configuration automatically. It can even generate sample update hook code for you to put in your deployment process.
Wow, that's a huge developer experience win.
Yeah.
Reduces so much risk and effort when your data structure needs to evolve.
Totally. A real game changer for long-term site maintenance.
Were there any companion modules mentioned?
Briefly, yeah. A module called Field Updater Service, which is still in beta, apparently, but the idea is to help migrate data from existing core fields into a new custom field, or potentially between other field types, too.
Useful for refactoring.
Yeah.
Okay, so with all these benefits, when would you not use custom field? Did the source cover that?
It did. Important caveats.
Yeah.
If you need a very specific, complex widget or formatter that only exists for a core field type or a niche contrib module, custom field might not have an equivalent subfield plugin yet, though its library is growing.
Makes sense.
Anything else? For really simple cases, like maybe just basic multi-value taxonomy tags where you'll be doing heavy faceting, a standard core taxonomy reference field might still be simpler and maybe have slightly deeper integration with Facet API out of the box, even though custom field can handle multi-value taxonomy subfields.
Okay, sort of a trade-off there.
And a key limitation mentioned. It doesn't currently support multi-valued subfields within a single instance of the custom field.
Meaning, like one question subfield, but multiple answer subfields allowed for that one question?
Exactly. You can't do that within one custom field item. That's where you'd probably combine them. Use custom field to group the Q&A pair, but then put that custom field onto a paragraph type to make the whole pair repeatable.
Got it. So it's about using the right tool for the job or combining them.
Precisely. They also touched on some advanced stuff, like a map field type for storing key value pairs or lists of strings, showing it's flexible.
And future plans.
More testing, maybe some clever entity reference selection logic, perhaps as a separate module, improving the formatted text widgets, maybe even dynamic entity references down the line. They emphasized it's collaborative, open to ideas.
It sounds incredibly comprehensive. The overall value, especially for complex sites, decoupled setups.
Yeah.
It seems really strong.
Yeah, the source positioned it as a way to really leverage Drupal's strengths data modeling, workflows, APIs more efficiently and performantly, helping meet those complex client goals. Less fighting the framework, more building the solution.
And that idea of holding visual settings alongside content data in a custom field.
Right. If your theme uses utility class as well, a custom field could store content and settings like background color class or text alignment class together. Not a full component system, but closer to structured component data.
Okay, wow. That was a really thorough look at these two modules, straight from the listener sources.
Yeah, quite a bit to unpack there.
We started with Facet Bot Blocker. Pretty targeted, right? Solving that specific real-world headache of bot traffic on faceted search, especially if you don't have a fancy WAF.
Understanding the why those exploding URL combinations and how it offers a practical way to mitigate the performance and cost hits.
And then the deep dive into the custom fields module,
Right.
which feels much more fundamental, tackling core performance limitations with that single table approach.
Right. Moving away from the table per field model for group data, but also simplifying config, reducing module dependencies, giving you that logical data grouping, which is gold for APIs.
And improving the authoring experience, the developer experience.
Especially that multilingual control at the subfield level. That's huge.
Yeah. And the strong integrations with Views, Search API, GraphQL Compose.
And of course, that killer feature, being able to safely add or remove subfields after data exists, that's just Massive.
It definitely feels like we got a solid handle on some quite technical but really impactful topics efficiently, thanks to the sources you shared.
Absolutely. And, thinking about custom field and how it bundles related functionality and abstracts away some core complexity,
Okay.
it does raise an interesting question for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. Given the power of a module like this more macro module approach, how should developers and site builders think about balancing these comprehensive modules versus using lots of small, single-purpose modules?
Yeah. Like, stick with many small, focused tools or embrace these bigger modules that try to solve several related problems.
Exactly. What are the trade-offs you see there? What are the benefits, the drawbacks? Maybe what new possibilities does that kind of approach open up for the future of building sites with Drupal?
That's a great thought to end on. Something definitely worth mulling over.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Catch you on the next one.
Okay, we're done. To close off this podcast, I just wanted to remind you that this brief was a fully AI-generated summary, and we take no credit for the original content. If you want to learn more, then check out the source. This podcast is produced by the team at Drupal Forge. Drupal Forge is the new #1 open-source development and hosting platform. It has all the functionality of the expensive platforms, but at very affordable prices. If you're looking for a new hosting provider, contact us for a demo before you get locked in. And if you like this podcast, hit subscribe, post a link on social media, and recommend it to 2 friends. That's it. See you next time. Bye for now.